Hello, everyone. I'm Anastasia Sharova, the founder of Happy Bellyfish, and I'd love to welcome you to our weekly podcast, Healthy Eating, Unbiased and Simplified. It's our fourth episode, and today is dedicated to intuitive eating. So in our podcast series, we invite nutritionists, doctors, farmers, and food scientists to discuss all things healthy food and healthy eating. And if you think that there is only one way to eat right, to eat healthy, well, maybe I've got one challenge for you. So just, I don't know, try to go and ask your colleagues what diets they follow or what their food views are. And you will be really surprised how many different diets people follow, and also how confident they are about them and how confident they are about promoting them to others. So if you're watching me right now yourself, please say hi, wave at me, introduce yourselves, and let me know if there is any particular diet that you follow, if there is any specific way of eating that you follow. I'd love to hear that. Today, however, we are not going to talk about the diet, or better say, we are going to talk about something completely opposite, about intuitive eating. So we have a very special guest on today's episodes. Her name is Amanda Lambrecht, and she's a registered dietitian and a licensed nutritionist. So Amanda works with intuitive eating, and she helps people with different eating disorders or with a history of eating disorders to overcome it and to make peace with food. So let me switch on Amanda. 1 second. Hello, Amanda.
Hi.
You can hear?
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Well? Yes, fantastic. So how are you doing there?
I am good. It's kind of nice to take a little break in my day. It's 1 o'clock here, so.
Perfect lunch break, I guess.
Yes,
so
it is.
Thank you so much for joining us on the show today, and to coming and to talk with me about intuitive eating and about your work, and maybe you'll even share some stories from your practice with us later. But tell me first, how did you, like you're a professional nutritionist, how did you come to intuitive eating at all? What happened? What led you to working to this, to taking this approach professionally?
Yeah, so I guess to kind of backtrack in my history, when I was younger, kind of like high school age into college, when I started to pursue studies in nutrition and dietetics, I didn't know what intuitive eating was. And I don't think many people did until more recent years. And so I really struggled with a lot of body image issues growing up. And a lot of times that anxiety that I felt around my body image and things like that, I would try to control my food and restrict and overexercise a lot. So that was honestly part of the reason that I chose dietetics or nutrition as my field of study, because I just was really drawn to that. However, I didn't really know anything about intuitive eating until I entered into graduate school, and one of my classmates presented on it. And so that was kind of the first time that I ever learned about intuitive eating. And at first I was really resistant to the idea, because I think like a lot of professionals, when they hear intuitive eating and only hear about like just follow your hunger and fullness, it sounds very like woo woo, and why would I do that? That's going against everything I learned. But then as I actually read the book and participated in a lot of trainings, it made a lot more sense and really was in line with my values as a professional.
I see. It's very interesting that you mentioned that intuitive eating has not been known as a term until recently, which is it feels kind of surprising, right? Because everything that's linked to intuition is supposed to be natural, and it's like we have to relearn natural things. I think it comes not just to food, but a lot of other aspects of our lives.
Yeah.
But maybe you can tell us a little bit, like in a nutshell, because I know it's a very big concept.
Yeah.
But what is intuitive eating? What is it?
Yeah, so I guess in a nutshell, I would describe it as this dynamic integration of your instincts, emotion, and also rational thought. So that helps you make informed choices about what you're eating because you're able to rely on those three things. So while sometimes people will simplify it into just listen to your hunger and fullness, like I mentioned, it's really a lot more than that. And there's actually 10 principles to intuitive eating. So it was created by two registered dietitians here in the United States. Their names are Elise Resch and Evelyn Tribole. And they're the founders, and they actually wrote their first book, version of intuitive eating, back in the 1990s. So even though it's been around for quite a while, again, it's not something that's conventionally taught in school for nutrition.
I see. Just before I ask you the next question, I see that there are some people who already joined our conversation. So everyone, please say hi to us. Say that you can hear us properly. We really hope so. And please share your experience. Have you heard about intuitive eating before, and have you tried it yourself? Or maybe you know some people who are really following that approach and very happy with that. Yeah, I only see hearts and likes for now.
Well, that's a good sign.
Yeah, that's a good sign, and that's a great start. So, Amanda, you mentioned that there are 10 main principles of intuitive eating. So what are these principles? Maybe you can just say, how is it like to have to implement all 10 of them? Because it sounds a little bit overwhelming.
It does sound overwhelming, and you're exactly right. There is a lot of overlap, I will say, between some of the principles, but there's so a lot of them, as you're working on one principle, you might find that you're kind of working towards the next one. So, for example, the first principle is to reject the diet mentality, and so it's really important to kind of get out of that diet mindset before we even really start talking about nutrition, just because if you're approaching it just talking about nutrition initially, you probably already have that diet mindset. So you're just going to essentially go on another diet. So it's really kind of reframing your thoughts and having a different perspective around food. So you don't necessarily have to go in the order of the principles. I mean, they do have a certain order when you're reading the book, but if you work with a dietitian or someone trained in this area, they might go in a different order based on where you're currently at in your relationship with food.
Mm-hmm. So the way that you're describing it, the profession of nutritionist, how we know it, I mean, we are who are not nutritionists themselves, that, it's a person who really understands the science behind food and behind eating, what's happening with our bodies. And then, let's say, if I come to a nutritionist with a particular problem, that I'll get some meal plans maybe and instructions. Maybe some great numbers of calories or what I should eat and what I should not eat.
Yeah.
But what you're describing now, it sounds more like a work of a psychologist, or a counselor, more than actually a nutrition science. So how does it come together, the nutrition science and the mental aspect of it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So there are actually a lot of therapists, particularly those who work with eating disorders, who are well educated in intuitive eating and how they use that. And so you do use a lot of motivational interviewing and therapy approaches when you work with a client. But to answer your question, the nutrition comes into play. So there is, let's see, principle 10 is to honor your health. And by doing so, you're bringing in what we call gentle nutrition. So it's not so much the rigidity of have X grams of carb a day and don't eat more than this many calories. It's more so looking, what are your health goals? What are some of your pain points as far as nutrition? So I might have someone who, say, has celiac disease, and it's medically necessary that they are aware of gluten content in food, but we can still work at those goals or do a therapeutic diet through the lens of intuitive eating.
I see. We've got somebody writing, Linda Burton, that she's very excited for our panel, and she's a retired registered dietitian in the US.
Awesome.
So Linda, I wonder if it's somehow a new concept for you or not. I mean, you're a professional here, and it's great to that you're joining us. Yeah. Thank you. So, how does it work in practice what you're describing now? Like, because you're working with clients, right? You have a virtual private practice, and you have a amazing blog actually, which has a very educational. Like, I was. I found it super interesting. You know, I couldn't stop when I was seeing the materials that you share, and thank you for that. And so the clients who come to you, what do they struggle the most when they have to switch? Because I assume that most of us, even I also have this diet mentality. Everyone has it, you know. Everyone, I guess it starts in our teenage years, yeah, when every single person, especially girls, get issues, you know, thinking if I look good enough, and then somebody says that you have to go on a diet, you should stop eating this and that and that. And then, you know, they come to you and then you say something completely opposite.
Yeah.
So how does it work?
So to answer kind of the first part of that question, how does it work when I first start working with a client, or what are some of their struggles? So particularly in my private practice, I also see people in person. I have a retail job full time, so my private practice is kind of on the side. I like to stay busy. And so people often will come to me and they have gone through something called weight cycling, which a lot of you have probably heard of, and or yo-yo dieting as well. And they've been on every diet under the sun. Perhaps they've had some successes along the way if their goal was for weight loss. But then often what happens is they'll come to me and they'll say, I need you to help get me back on track. I'm out of control. I can't stop eating. And I've gained all this weight back. Like I've really failed at dieting. And so this approach is so much different because we're looking at it from, okay, it's not that you failed these diets, but research shows that there's, in people who have lost weight successfully on a diet, 95% of those people are gaining that weight back, and sometimes extra weight beyond what they started with, within 1 to 5 years. And so for me, I don't ever prescribe weight loss because I don't see weight loss as a behavior, right? We can't really control that number on the scale as much as we think we can. But what we can do is promote more health-inducing behaviors. So, right, everyone can benefit from having more vegetables in their diet and fruit and things like that. Yeah, so it's more so looking at that. So I think sometimes when people hear of intuitive eating, or sometimes the way it's portrayed on social media in particular, it kind of seems like all these people do is eat donuts and they throw their health out the window. But really, it's just a gentler way of coming and meeting your clients where they are. So if someone does want to lose weight, it's not that I'm saying, oh, that's a stupid goal to have. Why would you want to do that? It's more so, what are some ways that we can make you feel better in your body right now?
So it has to do a lot with the positive body image, it seems, right? Like it's...
Yeah, it's definitely, there's a lot of connections between having more of a positive body image. And I think just like the approach that a lot of intuitive eating dietitians use in their practice, it's really promoting self-efficacy. So when you're learning to listen to your body's needs instead of silencing it, like we're often taught with diet culture, that also has been shown to improve your self-esteem and your self-worth. So a lot of it's really just intertwined.
I see. Linda wrote, I don't know if you can see the comment.
I can, it kind of pops up,
yes,
yeah.
That's fantastic, yeah. So she's saying brand new concept for her, but she hasn't worked with clients for 5 years. So it kind of confirms, you know, the novelty of this approach.
Yeah, yep.
It is still so natural. And I guess also what we were just talking about, the positive body image, it's also a rather new trend. You know, only in the past few years, people started speaking up about it, that the normalcy is relevant, right? And especially when it comes to weight, it's also relevant, and you might not have to lose it at all to stay healthy. It's a very individual thing. But coming to goals, so what are the main reasons that people go to intuitive eating? Is it kind of the approach that people follow when they have a particular type of disorder, or is it something that's suitable for everyone, or is it more common approach for specific cases when it comes to health?
Right. Yeah. So there are some instances where it's really counterindicative to use an intuitive eating approach. So, for example, if I am seeing a client who has, severe anorexia and they really need to have some weight restoration, and they probably have been silencing their hunger cues for so long that they're probably not going to be able to relate to some of the concepts of intuitive eating. So on the other hand, I mean, there are certain things that we can work with them on in the meantime while trying to get some weight restoration for their health. We can start talking about breaking down the diet mentality, or one of the principles is addressing the food police. So that's kind of either those outer critics. The food police? Yeah. So I love talking about the food police. So the food police is kind of, there's two ways to look at it. It can be that outer critic who makes comments about your food like, oh, you're really going to eat those potato chips, or just kind of like that judgmental voice. And it can come, the book talks about different tones that can have. And then it's also your inner critic too. So it's what makes you feel guilty, like, oh, should I really have had that chocolate cake or something, instead of realizing like, yeah, I was hungry. That's totally fine. I can enjoy that chocolate cake or whatever it might be. So that's something we can still work with people with severe anorexia on. But at the same time, we're probably going to want to give them a little bit more structure and help them with maybe making sure they're getting enough nutrients on their plate and all of that. So there is still some structure with doing some meal planning.
Okay. Yeah, I wanted to ask you actually, why do you need a nutritionist for that? But you just replied at why. In severe cases, some real structure is needed, and I can totally understand that.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, also switching to something completely new is not easy, and as you said, there is a lot of kind of mental work which is involved in it, and usually it's something that's very difficult to do on your own. And but talking, like you mentioned yourself, that some people think that intuitive eating, it's a lot about giving into your cravings and indulging.
Mm-hmm.
So that if you're intuitive eater, yes, you want a donut, you just go and get it, and then you can have 5 or 10 maybe, right, if you're hungry.
Yeah.
Isn't it a little dangerous? Because like, where is this thin line between being really hungry and following your hunger, and just having some other maybe psychological triggers to like comfort eating, or some other reasons for your body to crave something that's really unhealthy and it's really bad for you? And okay, we can talk and say that the food police should not be there, but there are facts. If you eat half a kilo of sugar, you will not feel good afterwards.
Yeah.
And if you do it daily, then probably you will have some bad consequences for that after that. So how do you work with cravings, and how do you recognize where is this craving is healthy and where it's something that you really have to work with very seriously?
Yeah, so a lot of times what I find is I'll have people, like I had mentioned, who are chronic dieting. And so they, for a long time, have been told, okay, I can't crave these foods, or I really am restricting, and it's kind of an all or nothing mentality. And so what happens is then they'll binge eat those foods, and it's kind of this binge restrict cycle. So part of what we work through with intuitive eating will actually help with those binges, is because you're giving yourself complete permission to eat any food that you want. It doesn't mean that you have to eat those foods. I will say for when people are first starting out and experimenting with this, I do have some clients who report that they feel like they're eating all the food and they're just kind of rebelling and everything. And sometimes you do go through this rebellious stage where you may eat more than really feels good. But part of what does happen in turn over time is from those experiences. I like to think of them as learning experiences, because you will notice, like you mentioned, eating a lot of sugar at once, you probably aren't going to feel so good afterwards. So that's kind of where that integration of your rational thought comes in and learning from experiences, because hey, last time I ate that much sugar, I really didn't feel so good. And so I'm going to honor my health, and maybe I'm going to choose something that's going to sustain my energy a little bit better in this moment. So there's lots of different nuances with intuitive eating. And I think when you sit down and learn about it, it's so much more complex than I think people realize when they just hear intuitive eating.
There's a very interesting example that you said that, you do give into a craving and then you feel really bad. And then it's like a bit of a lesson for you, right? That maybe you become more conscious about what you should do and what you shouldn't do. It reminds me a little bit like bringing up a child. There is an approach when you ban everything. You know that it's a hot pan and the child should never touch it. And parents, they don't know, and not hot pan is just an example, but I think it works with many things in life. And there is another approach when they say, okay, let him touch. We'll feel the pain and we'll not do it again.
Yeah, it's certainly a learning experience. And also relating back to that child too, sometimes you have to dig into that inner child and think about how, for the most part, we're all born intuitive eaters, right? Like we have a pretty good knowledge when we're younger of when we're hungry, when we're full, and we kind of give certain cues as to when we are hungry and full. However, over time, whether it's a lot of environmental and social factors come into play. So I'm not sure what it's like over there, but growing up, it was kind of like you're on the clean plate club. So before you can leave dinner or have dessert, you have to clean your plate. Where as a kid, you maybe have these experiences where it was like you had to finish your plate. Well, now those are things that you carry with you, and you might feel like I can't waste food and this and that. And so kind of it's almost unlearning a lot of the messages that have been passed down or taught to us over the years. And so really just trying to get back to more the basics of listening to your body and what it actually wants.
So with your clients, do you actually go that far? Do you try to, dig into the childhood times and understand why they have certain triggers or certain cravings or certain patterns, eating patterns?
Yeah. So in our first appointment with each other, particularly in my private practice where I see I see a lot of clients right now who exhibit more binge eating behaviors or emotional eating. And we really just kind of dive into in that first session, okay, what is your history like? What diets have you been on? What was your environment around food like when you were growing up? And so it's, again, like you said, it's a lot of psychology and looking into the past. But of course, we still are bringing in some of our nutrition knowledge that we went to school for. There's this podcast that I really love. It's called Food Psych by Christy Harrison. And she's this popular dietitian in the States. And the first question she asks people on there is, what was your relationship with food like growing up? And so I've learned a lot from that podcast in my profession as well. And just thinking like, hey, you can actually tell a lot about why someone eats the way they do or how their personality is now around food just by talking about what the environment was like growing up.
Thank you for mentioning this podcast. We will definitely share it later in resources. We'll give a link to that so that everyone can take a look at whatever we basically mentioned in the episode today. We'll do that. And whoever is listening to us right now, who is ever watching, if you have any questions, use this chance, ask Amanda or share your experience. Tell us what you think about what we're discussing now, or maybe share your experience with your eating habits and with your cravings and with your eating patterns, or what Amanda was saying right now about your environment. Do you actually see any link between how you eat now, what troubles you sometimes face with the way you eat, and how it was in your childhood? Can you find those patterns? Share it with us. We'd love to hear. So, Amanda, I think for me, like from everything that you're saying, the most challenging part is actually to be able to listen to the body, to understand your own body, because there are a lot of things. It's not just the voices from outside, because there are a lot of things that are told to us. There is a reason why I opened this episode and I said, go try to talk to your colleagues and ask, what's their food philosophy, because food philosophy is almost like a religion these days for all of us. And so everyone is very confident about what they follow and promoting their ways. So we listen to that, we read a lot of things, a lot of information is thrown at us on the internet, on social media, even without us sometimes asking it. Of course, it all affects our choices. And the other layer of complication is generally, I know very few people who are actually able to listen to themselves and to understand their bodies also on a physical level, not just in terms of food. And sometimes I would even doubt, is it something you can really learn? And if yes, where do you start?
Yeah, so a lot of people will have that question too, like it just almost sounds too good to be true. Like, how can I just simply eat when I'm hungry, stop when I'm full, and have this good relationship with food where I'm not labeling foods in this dichotomous manner, meaning black and white thinking with this food's good, this food's bad. And so it takes a lot of work. So sometimes I have clients who come to me and they don't really know what their hunger and fullness looks like, right? So they might not realize that this afternoon headache that they get every day is because they're hungry. So sometimes I'll have people do a little bit of a journaling activity. So while traditionally a lot of dietitians will have people like keep track of their calories and their food, and I mean, it depends on the dietitian. I am more concerned about, how are you feeling? Are you feeling really hungry at this time? Are you getting a headache? What are some of these things that we can identify? I also use what's called a hunger discovery scale. And so this is just a scale, and I think I have a visual of it on my website under one of my blog posts. I think it's under my post called Principle to Honor Your Hunger. And so it's just a scale where it's like, on one end, you have the extreme of the tank is empty, like I could collapse, I'm so hungry and I need some fuel. And then you have the other end where I would describe as like on the holidays where you've just stuffed your face and you're uncomfortably full. So there's different places in between too. And so ideally you want to be, when you're eating, you don't want to be where the tank is empty so that you're ravenously eating everything in sight. You kind of want to be somewhere in the middle so that kind of identifying that can be helpful. So we might do some journaling exercises and talk through that in our sessions.
I think it's such an important point about the hunger, because it really brings, again, the teenage years memories to me personally, because, in our class, in our girls group, we always had those girls who were the thinnest, and they would not eat. It was almost shameful to have hunger and to eat in front of others. And this is very interesting, because in conversation with different people, also students in our Happy Bellyfish school, I sometimes hear that people are a little bit embarrassed to eat in front of others, to eat a lot, let's say, like this. Like it's kind of a social norm, you can't you can't show yourself as being very hungry because it's for whatever reasons, it seems to be inappropriate. And to me, it seems to be almost like a social issue. It's not just your personal issue, but it's something that exists in the society. Do you also feel that the social norms affect that the way that the people behave and the way they eat?
Absolutely, yeah. There's a lot of social norms that go along with it. And so I'm not sure if you're familiar with this term or have just heard of it in passing, but there's this whole newer movement called Health at Every Size, or HAES, which is just the first letter of each of them. And that is kind of, when I look at intuitive eating, I think of HAES as the umbrella, and then of this whole paradigm at which I'm working with clients. And then I think of intuitive eating as kind of that lens that I'm looking through when I'm assessing clients and working with them. So the point that I'm getting at is that Health at Every Size is really a social justice movement. And so it's looking at how a lot of how diet culture has really harmed a lot of people over the years. And sometimes that can be painful to reckon with, that sometimes the things and approaches that we used on people have been harmful, but also realizing like a lot of the approaches that we've had have caused a lot of weight stigma, which has a lot of negative effects too. And there's lots of research out there about that. So if we can come to our clients with a more weight neutral approach, that can be really helpful. But as far as, I guess that's the paradigm that I use, but just in social settings, you'll see that seep in too, where it's like you're very self-conscious of what you're eating because it is very known. You see this on the internet all the time, people making comments about each other's bodies or why would you eat that? And it's just a lot of shame associated with it. Yeah.
Talking to you now, I'm getting just more and more respect to modern nutritionists, because as you said that the organization that you mentioned is that it's so important to talk about health in different sizes, and I think still nowadays there is this image of a healthy person who is very thin, and also in the social media sphere and in blogs, people who talk about health and nutrition, they're also very thin, and this is the image that's kind of being portrayed, but 100% it does not necessarily mean health. And I think there are also enough public stories talking about people who are thin actually having much more problems and disorders and complicated mental issues with food.
Yeah.
We have one question. It's quite long, so I'm going to hide it. I'm just going to read it out for you. Okay. Okay. Jem is asking, now diet culture is so strong and hard for people to believe. I think it's always helpful for people to know of the success of intuitive eating. What successes have you seen with your clients with intuitive eating, Amanda?
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you for that question. So in some of my clients, particularly in my private practice, I have one particular client that comes to mind right now. And some of the work that we've done together, I guess, just to give a baseline, she came to me and just was really anxious around food. Some of like self-esteem was a little bit lower, I would say, and just needed a little bit more confidence in knowing what to eat. In the past had done a lot of like calorie tracking, and macro tracking is pretty popular too. And just, doing a lot of the same things that most people in our society do. And she had read, I had done this write up for Self magazine about some of my own struggles in the past and kind of how I've gone more towards normalized eating now. And she really related to that. And so we started working together. And she was also reading the book Intuitive Eating at the same time, which I find to be very helpful in my clients because I can't always articulate everything as well as the experts who wrote the books. So it's kind of nice to get that perspective. But anyway, I'm rambling at this point, but she has just made so many strides in our work together. We've had only 5 sessions together, and just very excited. Cooking had kind of become such a chore because there was so much worry around, does it have too much fat or too much calories or too much carbs, that it just was not enjoyable. And now she comes back to me and is like, oh my gosh, I made this meal this week. And I have this platform that I do my charting on, and I do webcam, much like we're doing right now with clients across the country. And she sent me a picture like, look at this plate or whatever, this is what I ate, and I didn't feel like I had to finish it. And just I love seeing people get so excited about it and not beating themselves up because traditionally it's like they don't want to come back to your office because I didn't lose weight this week, or they're afraid of being scolded, and I just see so much more excitement and enthusiasm around their health.
Yeah, that sounds actually liberating, right? That
Yeah.
whole life you study the box and the sets of rules, and then suddenly you're kind of free. You're kind of free from that. But Jamie also asked one more question, which is very much related to that. I'll read it again. People come to me like that, have to you, and I think I can safely say they come to us not being able to trust themselves after years of being told that they can't. In what way do you believe intuitive eating can get people to a place of trust and respect in ways that food rules can't?
Yeah, so kind of what I had mentioned a little bit earlier too is that we're really giving them the confidence to realize like our body tells us a lot more about what we need in regards to food and movement than we realize. It's just that we've shut down those messages over the years because it's been replaced with messages of diet culture or the newest trend or, what an influencer is doing on social media. And so something that we can help do is build our confidence in knowing like, hey, you just need to do these different things and we can work together. And it, like I said, it builds their self-efficacy. You can also see in the research too, and I can certainly link to a website that has an annotated bibliography of a lot of the different studies, but it's really enhancing your satisfaction with life. It's been shown to improve your self-compassion and self-esteem, body appreciation, and then there's also lower markers for distress. So some of those markers of distress include binge eating, depression, body dissatisfaction, disordered eating, food-related anxiety. So it's been shown to do all those different things. And I can safely say that anecdotally, I can see that in my clients too. So I think that's part of the reason that they're able to really trust themselves again and trust their bodies.
That's not easy to achieve, I can imagine.
No,
Yeah.
it definitely, it takes, if you think about it, it took some time for those messages to seep into our being. And so it's going to take a little bit of time and a lot of hard work to work through that. That's why, I always encourage people, even if you feel like you need more support as you're reading the book, that it's always good to reach out to people, follow a lot of different accounts too. And if you need to, really find someone who's aligned with those messages that you can work with.
Yeah, that's a good approach. And we have one question more from Shrikant, and he's asking, what should one watch out for to not get into the sphere of indulgence? I think it comes back to us talking about cravings and that thin line of being able to control yourself, and being able to not harm yourself.
Yeah. So this kind of goes back to, I think, what we were talking about earlier, and hopefully this is what they're asking, but it's more so when you're giving yourself permission, and again, it's a lot of psychology too behind it. When you're giving yourself permission to have these things, a lot of times I find they're actually not all that appealing anymore. So I always use the example of if I give a kid a bag of like M&Ms or something, and I say, you can have all the M&Ms that you want, but you can't have the yellow ones. Well, now that's all they're going to think about, right? The yellow ones are going to be extra appealing. And so that's a very simplified example, but I kind of think of that in the same way as diet culture, when it's like I'm on this diet and they're telling me I can't have I don't know, we'll say chocolate cake. Well, now I'm really going to want that chocolate cake, and I might binge on it because I think it's kind of like the Last Supper mentality. I think I'm never going to have it again, so I'm going to eat a lot of it right now. And so a lot of what we do is we'll work through those emotions and realizing like, kind of going back and questioning yourself, is it really true that I'm never going to eat this again? Would I be fine just having one slice of this? I could also have more than that. It's really a lot of thinking things through, I guess, where that rational thought comes into play.
And in your practice, do you also include kind of an educational aspect about the effects of food? I mean, you kind of allow, I don't want to say you allow your clients to have certain foods. It's not about allowing, right? But they allow themselves, you set them free for enjoying the foods they thought they couldn't. But Still, do you also talk about the effects of foods and still categorizing foods which are better and worse, or is it something you're just very careful about and you just don't touch at all?
Oh, we definitely touch it. Yeah. So, it's obviously true. Like there are some foods that are just inherently more nutritious than others, right? Like if I'm comparing a chocolate chip cookie to kale, one is going to be inherently more nutrient dense than the other, right? And so, but it's a lot of it's, I just am very careful about the language that I use around food, right? Because I think food can serve very many different purposes. A lot of times we get so stuck in food as fuel and I have to have really high quality fuel for my body. But then we also forget that food is also part of our experiences and joy in life too. And so trying to be able to intertwine the two. So again, you kind of bring in towards the end honoring your health. So for example, I had a client last week who I'm working on a lot of these different things with as well. But then they also had been told recently that their cholesterol levels were elevated. So that was definitely a concern, causing a little bit of stress. So we look at it from a couple of different ways. So when I'm talking to someone, I really am interested in knowing about their nutrition, their movement, or exercise, you could call it. But then I'm also really intrigued by their stress level or perceived stress. And then I also want to know about their sleep, because I think sometimes we could get so tunnel vision and think it's only exercise and it's only nutrition that affects these things. But really, studies show there are a variety of things. So it's really bringing in the whole picture so that we can give clients the best quality of care. But then, of course, I'm not just going to leave people hanging. So, for example, with the cholesterol client, I still am providing information for them, right? So there's research that shows that getting plant stanols and sterols can be really beneficial to our cholesterol. So I talk more about what are some foods that you can add into your life and incorporate that are going to be beneficial without it seeming like I have to go on this very restrictive diet.
Mm-hmm. I really love that you're saying that you're also taking like the all-round approach, that you're generally looking at the lifestyle, also beyond the foods and beyond exercise. I mean, you mentioned sleep, I guess stress levels and a lot of other aspects, yeah, of how people, their life situation, they're also very important taking the picture. And I think that not everyone does. Yeah, we like a lot of people, everyone tends to kind of get stuck on one idea. Yeah, that if I fix what's on my plate, then that's fine. I'll fix all my problems. But it's not exactly like that, right? Like you have to other aspects as well.
Yeah. And I'm totally guilty of that too. I don't want it to seem like, oh, I have always been like that. I've definitely learned over the years, and I've done a lot of training on how to help my clients. So I think when I first started out, it probably was just like, I did a lot of clinical dietetics, meaning I was in a hospital setting. So I would just go into the room if they had diabetes and do my quick little education. And to be honest, it probably wasn't very effective. Whereas now I'm like, okay, there's a lot of different factors that I need to consider. So if you're out there listening and you're like, oh, I don't do any of this, I don't consider those things, like it's totally fine. We all start somewhere.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that clinical dietetics, if I'm pronouncing it right.
Yeah, you're
good. That where only one aspect is taken into consideration, because I know personally a lot of people who you can say suffer the consequences when a certain type of diet was prescribed based on the very few sets of parameters that was given, and then it didn't bring results. And yes, it's wonderful that you're approaching it completely differently now and helping people in that way.
Yeah, I do my best.
Yes. So guys, those who are watching us now, because we're soon going to be coming to the end of our discussions, you have not that many chances left to ask your questions. Do it now. Do it now. Ask anything you want to know about intuitive eating. Ask Amanda. Amanda, I also know that you have a free guide. Is it correct about intuitive eating, or tell us about it?
So if you just go to my website, I created this because I do get a lot of questions about intuitive eating and what does that mean? And so if you're not quite ready to pick up the book, you can go to my website, and right on the homepage, there should be this big link that shows a picture of the guide. So if you click that, it'll take you to the page. I can also give you a direct link to it, and you just have to put in your email and it will send it to you. So, and you're technically on my email list, but I've only sent out 2 emails on my email list, so I promise I won't spam you.
And in that guide, everyone can just see the introduction to intuitive eating and what it is and how to start with this, right? Or
yeah, so it gives you a little bit of a background, and I also include some studies in there too, but it's giving a little description of each, so it's kind of giving you a taste for it. And then if you're intrigued even more, you can certainly pick up a copy of the book. I'm actually going to be doing a giveaway, a little sneak peek of a copy of the book Intuitive Eating, so I have one right here. This is what it looks like. I have done a couple of giveaways like this, so it'll be on my Instagram page sometime this week. So if you are interested, you can find me on Instagram and enter that once I post it. So I just like sharing intuitive eating with as many people as I can, and the easiest way is to give you a book.
I can really sense the enthusiasm, and I really love that educational aspect of your work. Because I noticed also with students in our school that when people, understand, when they educate, when they know the research, the science behind what the approach that they choose in terms of food or what they do in their kitchen, then it changes everything. And also when you do it in an approachable way, it really changes everything. I wish, it's my big dream that nutrition is becoming one day part of, like base education schools. It's not there yet, but worldwide, it's because it's the same problems and issues everywhere.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
And you also have a private book club you were sharing with me before the interview, where you're discussing literature, scientific literature, right, concerning intuitive eating or concerning nutrition in general.
So I'm launching it this week. So I just have a couple more tweaks to make on it, and then I will have it live and ready to go. But you're going to be able to join a book club. So I don't know if you guys do book clubs over there, but my grandma did a book club growing up, and I always thought it was the coolest thing. It was like these women who would get together, they'd all read the same book, and then they'd have certain chapters to read between sessions, and then they would discuss. And so since I do private counseling and things like that with clients, I wanted something that's more affordable and more accessible to a large number of people. So for our first book club, we're going to be doing the intuitive eating book, which is why I'm giving that away right now. And we're just going to meet every week, and we'll do a Facebook Live, much like we're doing right now. And I'll have certain questions that I will ask of people to kind of get things moving. And then it's also a place where they can kind of ask me some general questions too, so we can kind of work through it together. And then I think I have 9 Facebook Lives planned for it. And so that's kind of how that's going to go. And then if it works out well for people and people like it, then we'll kind of move on to another book after that.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing this. And we will leave all the links here, in the comments, so for everything that Amanda is mentioning. And also you can head over to our group, Healthy Eating Advice and Simplified. Hopefully Amanda will join our conversation there also, and you can also ask questions there, and we'll share all the resources. And Amanda, I'm really going to buy this book now for myself and read
good.
it. Because really your enthusiasm is contagious, and I'm very much excited about this whole concept, which is also very new for me. Mm-hmm. And I'm pretty much convinced that everyone should get really familiar with that. And maybe to the future generation, the people who are just to enter their teenage years, will have a completely different experience with food, and which they will be able to, carry also further in their lives.
Yeah,
and
I
be
hope
happier
so.
and healthier. Mm-hmm. No matter size, right?
Yeah.
So this is not what matters. So thank you everyone for joining us today. As I said, you can still ask your questions in the group, and you can also find Amanda on all social networks and contact her directly if you want to ask her something or if you have some comments. I really enjoyed this conversation, Amanda. Thank you for finding time. Thank you for sacrificing your lunch break for joining us. And I wish everyone a wonderful evening, a wonderful afternoon. I know people are seeing us from all around the world, and we'll also see this video later. So if you're seeing it as a replay and you want to write a comment, start with the word replay that we see it, and we will not leave it unanswered. And I will see you next week in our next episode. Thank you for being with us. Bye-bye. I hope you enjoyed this video. Now, head over to happybellyfish.com and check out some amazing online programs and cooking classes that we are offering together with food experts from all around the world. Eat healthy, keep your belly and taste buds happy.